There's an ongoing perception out there where people argue for some reason that counting calories is not beneficial or helpful or whatever. It's a weird concept. So in this video, I'm going to explain how calories in fact do matter, especially if you want to avoid obesity. Now on this first image, you can see on the right side the picture of my new Weight Loss Secrets book that doesn't talk about food. It's about understanding well, you can see right on the cover, why your brain, body physiology, emotions, and primordial drives want you fat and what you can do about it. So this is a strategy book for avoiding weight gain and obesity, and then if one is overweight or obese, it's a strategy to get back to normal weight. Now on the cover you can see my brother, who here weighs 190, which he weighed back in 2002, but then developed a really aggressive case, severe case of cervical dystonia, and he went up to 340 pounds. This was at the beginning of 2007, and at the end of 2007, or middle of 2007, he weighed 190, and he's weighed 190 ever since. And that's because he eats foods that are low in calories. So he doesn't necessarily count calories, but he eats foods that are low in calories. And if you eat foods that are low in calories, you don't have to count calories because you'll always be appropriate. And the best way to do this is to replace pro-inflammatory refined calories with vegetation. So on the bottom, what we see here are pro-inflammatory extremely caloric-rich calorie sources compared to vegetation. So let me give you another example of the way we can look at this and to really show how scary the high caloric or hypercaloric consumption scenario can be. So I was on a plane recently, and this was a snack option, so I pulled it. It's basically a 2-bite chia bar called the Health Warrior bar, right? I mean, it's just goofy nature stuff. And over here you have spring mix. You don't see like warrior salad or anything like that. It's just lettuce, right? It's mixed greens. And so no one uses health warrior salad language or any of these things, vibrant health leaves, or just salad. So there's no like emotional drive or emotional pitch for eating vegetables. Well here, of course, if you eat this chia bar, you'll be eating a health warrior bar. Now what's interesting about this, and I'm going to show you the size too, another picture of the size. I mean, you're talking about a small little 2-bite, 3-bite if you're being polite. And this could literally be a 1-bite bar. So in 1 bite or 2 bites, you get 100 calories. Now this pound of spring mix from Aldi only costs $4, by the way. $3.98 I think it was, or $3.89. And it is said to contain just 75 calories. Now, if you get other pound containers of spring mix, it'll say 100 calories. So how many of these could you eat in a day? If you wanted to maintain proper body weight or lose body weight, what if you ate 3 of these spring mix containers per day? Someone might say, well, I can't do that. That's just a lot of food. Well, it's only 300 calories. So imagine how one could save on their caloric consumption if we consumed in greater quantities the volume of calories that vegetation gives us, where we do not have to worry about calories. And in that sense, one not need to think about eating calories. But otherwise, we have to monitor our caloric intake. It's very clear that 70% of the adult population, out of that 70%, half are overweight and the other half are obese, and then you have gradations of obesity where it can become even more dramatic, where you have morbid obesity, where people are essentially wheelchair or bedridden. So, but the average person isn't there. They're just overweight or mildly to moderately obese. And so one needs to think about vegetation and the shocking low-calorie, high nutrient density, and that includes nutrients, key vitamins and minerals, and fiber. So vegetation, and on the cover of the DeFlame book, basically it's showing you got to replace your pro-inflammatory calories with anti-inflammatory vegetation. So when you think about the foundation or the base of a diet, it really should be vegetation for the average person. Now, we can look at this in terms of calorie consumption. People will also say, well, what do they say? Well, they talk about how if you avoid this macronutrient, you'll lose weight or that weight. And it's like if you avoid carbs, you'll lose weight. Well, if you avoid excess carb calories, you will. But if you eat a high-carb diet that is low in calories, you will indeed lose weight. And we know this because it's been known for a long, long time. This paper was published in 2008. And what they compared were two diets. And here they are. So overweight men and women with atherogenic dyslipidemia. Now, what does that mean? That means that you have high total cholesterol, high LDL cholesterol, low HDL cholesterol, and high triglycerides. That's what dyslipidemia means. And typically these people also have high glucose. So they either have metabolic syndrome or diabetes. So the intervention that these scientists used for 12 weeks, as you can see, they called one very low carbohydrate ketogenic diet, 1,500 calories. Now, if you carefully count your calories, to eat just 1,500 calories per day, and you don't eat a lot of vegetation, you will be shocked at how fast you reach 1,500 calories. It's really, really easy to drop 1,500 calories at a dinner in a restaurant. Really easy. So in this diet, they kept the caloric intake to 1,500 calories. 12% of total calories were carbohydrates. So CHO stands for carbohydrate, and then fat and protein. So I mean, it would have been easier if they just said 12, 60, 27. But it's 12% of the calories came from carbohydrate, 59% came from fat, and 28% came from protein. Now, if you think about the average person who's been conditioned to have fat fear, which is most Americans and Europeans and Canadians and around the world, we fear this high fat. Like somehow just if 60% of your calories are fat, oh my God, you're going to become obese, you're going to get diabetes. But you have to look at this in the context of the total caloric intake, 1,500 calories. So they compared that diet to basically the same caloric intake where you have a low-fat diet. In this diet, they had 56% of calories from carbohydrate, 24 from fat, and 20 from protein. So here is the big difference, right? You've got your your carbohydrate and fat differences. This is the big difference. Okay, so what was the outcome of eating this particular diet? Well, it's very straightforward, very simple. You would expect that both would lose weight, both populations would feel better, and both populations would have markers of inflammation substantially reduced. And that was the case for both of them. But this is what's interesting about this, and this is where at a normal, either at a weight loss, a low-calorie intake for body fat reduction, or a isocaloric, which means the amount of calories that you need to maintain your current body weight. If we do, which is typically, let's just call it 2,000 calories for the average adult, and 1,500 calories for the average adult will put you into a fat loss mode. So if we eat a diet that is balanced, like we see here with the higher fat diet versus the higher carbohydrate diet, where at 1,500 to 2,000 calories, you'll enter an anti-inflammatory state. Now what's interesting is that when you eat more, so the very low ketogenic carbohydrate ketogenic diet, so the higher fat diet, it beats the low fat diet in multiple ways. And that was nicely, elegantly outlined in that study from 2008, which is, of course, now you're looking at almost 11 years ago. So there was a slight but greater weight loss. Now this is all slight differences, but it showed that the higher fat, lower calorie diet was better for us in terms of weight loss, reducing fat content, because if you don't eat, you can easily lose muscle mass during weight loss. Turns out that a higher fat, low calorie diet preserves muscle mass, and we burn off more fat calories, which is how we get our more beneficial weight loss. There was better blood sugar control and insulin sensitivity with the high-fat diet. There was a more favorable improvement in triglycerides, HDL cholesterol, and LDL cholesterol with the higher fat, low-calorie diet compared to the low-fat, low-calorie diet. Now, what's most interesting about this is that, because everyone blames, saturated fatty acids, watch out for saturated fatty acids. I have an entire chapter, basically, in the DeFlame Diet book about saturated fatty acids because it's such a confusing topic. Need not be, but it is. It's because of the conditioning that most of us have been exposed to for 50 years. So total saturated fatty acids measured in blood were consistently decreased following the high-fat diet. So you say, how would that work? Well, if you're taking in low calories, you're going to be burning fat because you're eating fat, and you're in a hypocaloric state. You need to burn more. You need to burn calories, and what are you going to burn? Well, you're going to burn fat. You're not going to store the dietary fat if you're in a hypocaloric state. But what turns out, where there is a slight increase in saturated fatty acids on the low carb diet. Well, what? I mean, on the low fat diet. That's because they got more carbohydrates. And it turns out that everyone should know that when you eat more carbohydrates than fat, and I'm not sure what the perfect balance is, I don't know if anybody knows, we will make saturated fatty acids. The liver will make saturated fatty acids from the consumed carbohydrate. So in no way should anyone ever argue that a high-fat diet is problematic when it's consumed in a proper caloric balance, and that is the key. Because as the title of this video says, calories matter. If we eat a high-fat, high-calorie diet, we'll become obese, develop diabetes, and heart disease. If you eat no fat, but you eat a high-sugar flour diet at a high caloric level, the exact same thing will happen. You'll become obese, develop diabetes, heart disease, etc. So calories absolutely matter. But in the context of a normal caloric diet for proper weight maintenance or a hypocaloric diet for weight loss, it turns out that the higher fat diet, so the very low carbohydrate ketogenic diet compared to low fat diet, look at the difference in inflammation marker reduction. Now, do not worry if you do not recognize any of these inflammatory chemicals. It is not relevant for this video. So what you can see, you want to compare the numbers, 32% reduction versus 12, 33% reduction versus 4, and right on down the line. Every single measurement, there was a greater reduction of inflammation when a high-fat diet was consumed. Now, the problem when you think about high-fat diets is that people have weird conceptions of what a high-fat diet is. And they think a high-fat diet means that you overeat fat and get fat. I mean, it's just such bad thinking, God. So let's look at a ketogenic diet from some scientists in Spain. And they call their diet the Ketogenic Mediterranean Diet. So, it's not the typical thing where you just eat pounds and pounds of butter and cream. Look what they ate, or the misconception of what a ketogenic diet is. So here's what they ate. They ate olive oil as their primary fat calorie. They ate moderate red wine, green vegetables. They mostly ate fish as their primary protein source, but they also ate meat, fowl, eggs, shellfish, and cheese. So if you listen to the hardcore, ideologically possessed radical vegans who think that if you eat meat, it will cause heart disease. If you eat meat, it will cause all diseases. If that is the case, then eating meat should never result in a reduction in the metabolic syndrome or a related condition called fatty liver. So look what they did in diet number 2. They looked at eating these calories at a hypocaloric level. They had 24 people, I think it's 24, 23, and every single subject who completed the 3 months, it was 12 weeks, they reversed their metabolic syndrome completely. And then they used the study on fatty liver patients, and 21% of patients in 3 months eating these foods completely reversed their fatty liver. Otherwise, it was mildly or significantly reduced. And so to sit there and blame a meat or eggs or cheese or butter or whatever, it's just so preposterous. So we're going to look at this diet as a foundation type of beginning point to look at what we can do in terms of maintaining proper caloric intake. So getting back to what the foundations should be or the base should be of our diet if you want to lose weight and make it the easiest for you, for the average person. I mean, you can go pure ketogenic if you want. You can be a vegan if you want. It doesn't make any difference. Calories absolutely matter. So you take a pound of vegetation like this that is between 75 and 100 calories, and then you drop some fish on it. So here's, I'm cooking up some salmon here for 3 people, and I cook it in water, and I add a bunch of vegetables, and I spice it up. And most of these came from my yard, actually. Otherwise, like these onions I bought, but the rest of the stuff came from my garden. So you cook it up, and you throw it on top of all that vegetation. Now, if you eat a piece of this, let's just call it, I mean, I forget the calorie. It could be, I don't know, 200 to 300 calories for this. So you have 200 to 300 calories of meat, fish, or chicken, and you throw it on top of 100 calories of vegetation. You're looking at a high volume, high fiber dinner that is going to be less than 500 calories. You cannot gain weight like that. I mean, you will shred if you do that. So this is where if you ate like this and only ate like this with tons of vegetation, you don't have to count calories because you're never going to be high, because it's hard to get high when you're eating vegetation and proteins, particularly when you cook the fish like this in water, no additional calories from oil. So that's one way to look at it. Now, here's a scenario that makes it more difficult. I did a video in 2016 about how you can deflame at Aldi's, and this was one of the images that I used. And you can see you got the meat and cheese and bacon on top of a very small amount of vegetation. Adding that 75. Now, if you eat this, you know, you're not going to feel full necessarily because it's like not a massive portion depending upon how big you are. Particularly if you only, I think it's a double bacon cheeseburger. But if you only ate a single, you know, again, this is like 500 calories what we're looking at right here, 500 calories. And so you take this 500 calories and you drop it on 100 calories worth of spring mix, you got 600 calories. That's a small dinner, particularly if you're careful during the day. And so the easiest way to shred and not have to even worry about counting calories is to eat a ton of vegetation. Otherwise, you got to count. And the average person, for whatever reason, has been conditioned to think that that's not important. I don't understand why they would say that. So this is at an airport, and it's a small version. So this is going to be, this is either beef or pork on top of a ton of vegetation. And so all this anti-inflammatory vegetation. Now this is like filling for a couple hours for me. It's not like a big long filler because this plate is probably 400 calories, 300 calories. It's not a lot of calories. And so if you ate 3 of these a day, you're at 1,000 calories a day. Now that would be difficult for the average person, but you can think, if you count calories, you can shred so easily. And this is particularly important, obviously, during this particular season, because today is December 23rd. So the pig out has already begun since Thanksgiving. The pig out has been going strong this weekend, and you know, tomorrow is Christmas Eve. The pig out will blast into full gear, and then right through New Year's and Super Bowl, and this is where everyone gains 5, 10, 15, 20 pounds during the year, and then is all confused the rest of the year. So how do you make this low calorie and more filling? More vegetation. Very, very simple and easy to do. I was at a resort in the Dells in Wisconsin. You can see the resort right here, the Kalahari Resort. So this is a really good glass of vino. And you can see this is an 8 or 10 ounce fillet. And look at this vegetation this was so massive and so filling and so not high in calories. And you feel stuffed. And the next day, you feel like you didn't even eat dinner because it wasn't a massive caloric burden. I mean, most of the volume of vegetation is going to be fiber and water. It's like drinking a big glass of water. And so if you eat like this, calorie counting, not a big deal. But the average person doesn't do this. So you got to be careful with your added calories. And the average person gets their added calories in America from sugar, flour, and refined oil foods, which is a disaster. So let's get back to the ketogenic Mediterranean diet. They actually call it the Spanish ketogenic Mediterranean diet. So we're going to modify this from my DeFlame world. So this would be, these foods that were in this Spanish ketogenic Mediterranean diet were also in the DeFlame diet. Except that in the DeFlame diet, you could add butter, coconut oil. Now all of a sudden you've got a DeFlame ketogenic diet. So we just modify that Spanish ketogenic and add butter, coconut oil, whatever other fat you would want. Traditional fats, not the seed oil fats. So this would be these refined oils. Like you don't want to add corn oil and cottonseed oil. So these are the primary oils that people have consumed over generations. Tallow and lard as well, but those are not as commonly used anymore. So this would be the DeFlame ketogenic diet, and you want to mostly or completely avoid refined sugar or flour. Well, actually, for a ketogenic diet, you avoid this completely, right? But you know, if you want to lose weight or maintain your body weight, you can have a donut a day. Just make sure the rest of the calories are these guys. Or we can modify it. So let's just get to the DeFlame diet. So what would the DeFlame diet look like if we're not going ketogenic? Well, we're going to add some fruit. We're going to add roots and tubers, if you want. These are your options, nuts and seeds. So this would be the DeFlame Paleo diet, if you just stopped right here. And if you want to read the best paleo diet book, you want to read The Paleo Diet by Dr. Lauren Cordain, who was a professor, now professor emeritus at Colorado State University in, where is that? Fort Collins, Colorado. So, but let's just say you don't want to be a paleo guy. Well, what do you do? Well, then you throw in legumes, and now you're no longer paleo. So all of this is allowed on an anti-inflammatory, I call it the DeFlame diet, assuming that calories are appropriate for your goal of either weight maintenance or weight loss. When I say weight loss, I'm talking obviously fat loss. So what is the other calorie that is missing here that I think should be avoided would be whole grains. Now look how I made whole grains small. Whole grains are the least nutrient-dense food that we can eat. The rest of these are much more profoundly nutrient and fiber-dense compared to whole grains. Whole grains are the problem because whole grains, they are typically mixed with refined grains when you buy packaged foods, and then you get your sugar, flour, or your refined flour and oils in there as well. So these are the problem. I'm not saying you can't eat them. Of course you can. I mean, but how much rice or quinoa or millet do you want to eat at the expense of these other foods? Now remember, this top where you see the black fonts, this diet reversed metabolic syndrome and fatty liver. Why would you want to get rid of these calories for these calories when these calories are so much more nutrient dense? It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, for other people, they want to do it, so not knock yourself out. So the most important thing, whether you add whole grains or not, and I'm not saying you have to eat all of this. Choose your foods that suit you and get you to normal inflammatory markers as outlined in Chapter 9 of the DeFlame Diet book. And always we must, no matter what our diet is, we must maintain proper caloric intake to avoid excess body fat accumulation. And so there's this movement out there now called the plant-based diet, which is basically a code for vegan, which is fine, but I think they should just be intellectually honest and call it what it is. It's a vegan diet. It's not a plant-based diet. When you say, if my house is built on a concrete base, but the rest of it is not all concrete. So I have a concrete-based house. I don't have a concrete house. So if I eat mostly, like you saw my images back there of the foods that we were eating, we were putting some protein on a massive base of vegetation. And so really a plant-based diet is the DeFlame diet. So they should be honest and call it what it is. So can you do the DeFlame diet and be a vegan? And of course the answer is yes. So you can call it the DeFlame vegan diet. You get rid of butter, you get rid of fish, and all our animal products, and now you are looking at a vegan diet. Now that is the best way. So you can see in this video I showed you can be ketogenic, non-ketogenic, or vegan and be anti-inflammatory as long as you are maintaining proper caloric intake to avoid excess body fat accumulation. And then, so these are your options then. Much easier to look at life like this and maintain proper caloric intake. So if you are overweight or obese, you need to start counting calories to figure out where your excess calories are coming from. And the mindset that I think is most helpful at dealing with the dietary quagmire, the most muddy, water-muddied, is the water has been muddied by so many odd views. I suggest a very, very simple approach. Think about, is this food going to inflame me or deflame me? And then take charge of your mental state and learn the strategy for maintaining proper body weight. And that's what these two books are about. So I'd urge you to get copies, recommend them, share this video, because people are confused by things they need not be confused by.